Hey there, my name is Colton, and in this video I'm going to be introducing you to the Orca screen reader. Linux accessibility has come a long way, and although it does require some tinkering, there are many people who are able to use Orca for all their daily computer use. And so I hope that this guide can help introduce you to Orca and get you interested in the Linux accessibility ecosystem generally. This is an audio version of a written guide I have on my GitHub, and there'll be a link below in case you want to reference any other info. To summarize Orca at a high level, Orca is a general-purpose screen reader that works across many Linux desktop environments and distributions to help people of all abilities navigate their computer non-visually. So, if you've not previously used Linux, picking a general-purpose distribution to use with Orca like Ubuntu or Fedora, one that's common and well-supported is generally a good choice. And then pairing this distribution with an associated accessible desktop environment like Mate or GNOME will give you a good setup for Orca usage as a beginner. And then once you're logged into your desktop environment, you can launch Orca by simply pressing the Super key, also known as the Windows key, with Alt and S held down. You can also just type in Orca in the terminal. If you're familiar with other screen readers like NVDA or VoiceOver, Orca has many parallels. It has a special key called the Orca modifier. This is bound to either caps lock or insert by default and can be used to trigger keyboard shortcuts specific to your screen reader. For instance, if you press Orca and H, it will enter help mode, where you can press any arbitrary keyboard command, and Orca will tell you what it does. That being said, Orca is a fully distinct screen reader and doesn't intend on mimicking NVDA or another similar screen reader. Orca can be thought of as having multiple different modes, and the same key press will do different actions depending on what mode you're in. For a full list of keyboard shortcuts, you can see the cheat sheet I have linked in the description. With that being said, it's useful to enumerate the modes to help get a sense of how Orca's navigation works. If you're in help mode, Orca will tell you what the key would do. If you're in focus mode, Orca will navigate within the focused element. For instance, if you're in a text box and you press up, Orca will move the cursor to the previous line. If you're in browse mode, Orca will navigate elements structurally. In this case, if you press up, it will move to the previous element outside of the text box. Browse mode and focus mode can be toggled with Orca and the A key, but are often automatically switched if Orca detects you're in an editable text field. Flat review is another way to navigate a document and is toggled by pressing Orca plus Z. Flat review allows you to navigate a document directly line by line, and you don't need to jump structurally throughout the accessibility tree. This can be useful for debugging apps that aren't properly accessible, like ones which have elements that aren't tab navigable, among other things. Because of the fact Orca uses these different modes, it tends to be a bit more succinct with its keyboard shortcuts compared to another screen reader like VoiceOver. Once you have Orca installed, you will likely want to customize the associated voices. By default, Orca will use eSpeak. This synthesizer supports many different languages, but it's commonly criticized as being a bit too robotic.
This is a test of eSpeak NG. This voice is the default for Orca if no others are installed.
As such, you can install many other different voices to experiment with. The underlying speech server that Orca uses to connect to this text-to-speech synthesizer is called Speech Dispatcher or SpeechD, and thus any voice which works with Speech Dispatcher would also work with Orca. And so another great voice to check out is called RH Voice. It's free, supports a handful of languages, and is a bit more natural than eSpeak. It's also fairly easy to install.
This is a test of another voice.
In my opinion, the best synthesizer that works on Linux with Orca is called Voxen. The Voxen voice called Samantha is the same exact voice used in macOS or VoiceOver. One thing I will note, however, is that you do have to pay $20 for a license to install it.
Hello, my name is Samantha.
There is currently work bringing other voices like Piper to Speech Dispatcher, but this is not yet released in stable distros like Ubuntu, and thus you should probably wait on using these. It's important to note that installing a voice might require some command line usage, and if you're still new to Orca, it might be best to become acquainted more generally with how the screen reader works before you start changing any sort of configuration settings. If you do make edits or tinker generally, it's possible you might need to get some help or ask some general questions. The Orca Docs website is a useful page to reference for these sorts of concepts or keyboard shortcuts, but if you need help with a more specific issue or a question about the internals of Orca, it's probably best to sign up for the Orca mailing list, and then you can ask the community there. There are unfortunately relatively few other resources online to get help on these sorts of discussions, and so using Orca on a daily basis sometimes requires some patience, or you have to look through some past discussion, or just be willing to file bugs. With all of this in mind, I think it's useful to summarize all the pros and cons of Orca. On the upside, Orca is free software and it's not controlled by any corporate entity. This means that as a user, you're able to contribute directly to the Orca project. You can write code, you can document it, you can fork your own version, and Orca works quite well, honestly, for many workflows, especially those with a lot of browser use, or applications like VS Code that are going to be using Electron and thus use a browser engine under the hood anyways. With regards to downsides, Orca is a smaller project and there are less developers working on it compared to a project like VoiceOver or NVDA, and as a result, it's missing many helpful features like automatic language switching or a plugin system for custom add-ons. The Linux accessibility ecosystem itself is honestly quite limited in its development resources, and as a result, there are sometimes challenges even installing a Linux distribution non-visually, or occasionally just random bugs that may require some terminal usage to resolve. Many Linux applications made with older GUI toolkits may also just not be accessible to begin with. I'm really hopeful that in the future Orca adds an officially supported plugin system and a stable scripting API, as that would make it much easier for developers like myself to extend functionality and would help alleviate some of these challenges. That being said, despite the challenges, I really do encourage you to check out and give Orca a shot. You can install Linux via USB, and even just using the software and helping to report any bugs you encounter really does help to make the Linux desktop environment much better for everyone. I do feel very strongly that people shouldn't have to use a proprietary operating system in order for their desktop to be accessible, and just by building a larger community, we can help make that dream a reality. Regardless, I hope this video was useful to you. And for a more general video on Linux accessibility and its underlying technical background, you can feel free to check out my other video on the subject. Also, feel free to reach out to me at my website, linked in the description below, as well as if you have any inquiries or if your organization needs consultations on this sort of accessibility technology. Thanks for watching and have a great day.